The sun has barely risen. A cool breeze sweeps across an untamed landscape where small bands of early humans are beginning another day of survival. Smoke rises from dying campfires. The scent of roasted meat still lingers in the air from the previous night's meal. Hunters sharpen stone tools, while others prepare to search for food once again. Life is harsh. Every meal is earned through dangerous hunts. Every day is a struggle against hunger, disease, predators, and the unforgiving forces of nature. No cities exist. No kingdoms have been built. No written language records the triumphs or failures of these people. And certainly, there is no such thing as soap. After a successful hunt, animal fat coats the hands of the hunters. Smoke blackens their skin after hours tending the fire. Dust clings to sweat beneath the relentless sun, and over time, layers of dirt become part of everyday life. For countless generations, people wash only with water. Sometimes they scrub their skin with coarse sand, sometimes with smooth clay gathered from riverbanks, sometimes with crushed plants or aromatic leaves that leave the body smelling fresher for a short while. It helps, but only a little. No one understands bacteria. No one has ever heard of germs. The invisible world that causes infection and disease remains completely unknown. People simply accept that wounds often become infected, unpleasant odors are a part of life, and sickness can appear without warning. But history has a remarkable habit of hiding its greatest discoveries inside the most ordinary accidents. And one such accident may have happened beside an ancient fire. Imagine a family preparing a meal. Animal fat drips from roasting meat onto hot stones. Nearby, the remains of yesterday's fire have cooled into soft gray ash. As the cooking continues, melted fat mixes with the ash. A light rain begins to fall. Tiny streams of water carry the strange mixture across the rocks. Later, someone notices something unusual. The greasy cooking stones seem easier to clean where the mixture had collected. The slippery substance lifts away soot and grease more effectively than water alone. No one celebrates. No one realizes they may have stumbled upon one of humanity's most important discoveries. It is simply an interesting observation, one that countless other people in countless other places may have made independently over thousands of years. Long before chemistry had a name, nature had quietly demonstrated one of its simplest reactions. Wood ash contains alkaline compounds. Animal fat contains natural oils. When combined with water under the right conditions, these ingredients can begin forming primitive soap-like substances. Of course, those early people had no idea what was happening. They weren't trying to invent soap. They were simply trying to survive. Yet history is often shaped not by those searching for greatness, but by ordinary people paying attention to ordinary moments. Over many centuries, small discoveries like these gradually spread. Some communities learned that certain ashes cleaned better than others. Some discovered that boiling animal fat with ash produced a more useful substance. Others noticed that clothes washed with these mixtures seemed cleaner. Still, this knowledge remained local. There were no books, no teachers, no great libraries preserving these discoveries for future generations. Knowledge traveled only as fast as people could walk. Parents taught children, craftsmen taught apprentices, neighbors shared ideas, and slowly, almost invisibly, humanity took its first steps toward cleanliness. Then, thousands of years later, along the fertile valleys between two great rivers, a civilization emerged that would record this knowledge for the very first time. There, soap would finally step out of prehistory and into history. Imagine standing in one of the world's very first cities. The year is around 2800 BCE. You are in Sumer, deep within the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, often called the cradle of civilization. Unlike the wandering families of prehistory, these people have built something extraordinary. Towering mud brick temples rise above bustling streets. Farmers cultivate vast fields nourished by intricate irrigation canals. Merchants fill crowded marketplaces with grain, wool, pottery, copper, timber, precious stones, and goods arriving from distant lands. Scribes carefully press wedge-shaped symbols into soft clay tablets. For the first time in history, knowledge no longer depends entirely on memory. It can be written, it can be stored, and it can survive generations. Among the thousands of clay tablets recovered by archaeologists from ancient Mesopotamian cities are records that reveal something remarkable. Around 2800 BCE, Sumerian craftsmen recorded recipes describing mixtures made from water, alkali, and cassia oil. These mixtures were probably not intended for bathing. Instead, historians believe they were primarily used for cleaning wool before it was woven into textiles. That might sound ordinary today, but it represents one of humanity's earliest known written records of soap-like substances. For the first time, the knowledge had been preserved, not in stories, not in memory, but in writing. Imagine entering one of these early workshops. Large clay vessels bubble gently over carefully tended fires. Workers stir thick mixtures using long wooden paddles. Bundles of raw wool lie stacked beside jars of oils, ashes, minerals, and plant materials. Experienced craftsmen inspect every batch with practiced eyes. The process is slow, careful, deliberate. Without realizing it, they are laying the foundation for an industry that will one day span the entire world. As centuries pass, the knowledge travels. Southwest along busy trade routes, another great civilization begins adapting these early techniques: ancient Egypt. Along the fertile banks of the Nile River, cleanliness becomes deeply connected to daily life, medicine, and religion. For the ancient Egyptians, bathing was not simply about appearance, it was a matter of purity. Priests serving inside magnificent temples washed themselves several times each day before performing sacred rituals. Wealthy households employed servants who prepared fragrant oils and cleansing mixtures. Perfumes filled elegant homes. Cosmetics became part of everyday culture. The famous medical document known as the Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BCE, records recipes combining animal fats with alkali salts for treating skin conditions and for washing. These were not identical to the bars of soap sitting beside modern sinks, but they reveal something important. Civilizations across the ancient world were gradually discovering that fats and alkali materials possessed remarkable cleansing properties. Soap was beginning to evolve. Yet another civilization would soon help spread this knowledge even farther. Not through conquest, not through science, but through trade. Before we continue, if you're fascinated by the hidden stories behind the everyday things we often take for granted, you'll feel right at home here. We're on a mission to grow this community of history lovers to 1,000 subscribers this month, and your support would mean the world to us. So, if you're enjoying this journey, take a second to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover the extraordinary histories behind the objects, inventions, foods, and discoveries that quietly shaped our world. Now, let's go back to where our story continues. The scent of cedarwood fills the salty air. Hundreds of colorful merchant ships crowd a bustling harbor, their sails billowing gently in the Mediterranean breeze. Their cargo holds are packed with glass, purple-dyed cloth, olive oil, fragrant resins, spices, timber, wine, metals, and countless other treasures gathered from distant lands. But hidden among these valuable goods is something far less obvious: knowledge. The seafaring traders known as the Phoenicians were among the greatest merchants the ancient world had ever seen. Beginning around 1200 BCE, they established trading colonies and commercial networks that stretched across the Mediterranean, linking the civilizations of the Near East, North Africa, and Southern Europe. Wherever their ships sailed, ideas traveled with them. Techniques for working metal, methods of weaving textiles, recipes for perfumes and oils. And gradually, knowledge about cleansing materials and soap-like mixtures spread farther than ever before. Unlike conquerors, merchants rarely forced people to adopt new customs. Instead, they traded, they observed, they learned, and they shared. In one port city, an artisan might demonstrate how alkaline ash improved the cleaning of wool. In another, local craftsmen experimented with different plant oils. Farther west, communities adapted those methods using the natural resources available to them. Soap was still far from the solid scented bars we recognize today. Its appearance varied from place to place. Sometimes it resembled a thick paste, sometimes a soft gel-like mixture, sometimes a coarse cleansing compound prepared only when needed. There was no single recipe, only generations of experimentation. While these trading networks connected civilizations across the sea, another powerful kingdom continued refining practical chemistry closer to the great rivers. The Babylonians, heirs to earlier Mesopotamian traditions, preserved and expanded many forms of practical knowledge. Archaeological evidence suggests they continued producing soap-like materials by combining fats with alkaline substances, using them for cleaning textiles and other everyday purposes. For Babylonian craftsmen, cleanliness was not simply about comfort. It protected valuable goods. It improved manufacturing. It made trade more profitable. Sometimes, history advances not through dramatic inventions, but through thousands of tiny improvements made by ordinary workers. Then, across the Aegean Sea, a different civilization began asking different questions. The Greeks admired beauty, balance, discipline, strength. Athletes competing in the Olympic Games did not bathe with soap before competition. Instead, they coated their bodies with olive oil to protect the skin from dust and the harsh Mediterranean sun. After training, they used a curved bronze tool called a strigil to scrape away the mixture of oil, sweat, and dirt. To modernize, it may seem unusual, but for Greek athletes, it was an effective method of personal hygiene. Greek physicians also began thinking more carefully about health. Among them was Hippocrates, often remembered today as the father of medicine. Living during the 5th century BCE, Hippocrates argued that cleanliness, diet, fresh air, and careful observation all played important roles in maintaining health. Disease, he believed, was not simply punishment from the gods. It often had natural causes. That idea would influence medicine for centuries. Yet, even the Greeks, remarkable as they were, had not yet built the greatest bathing culture the world had ever known. That achievement belonged to another civilization, one whose roads, aqueducts, and cities would stretch across 3 continents, one whose public baths became symbols of civilization itself, the Romans, and with them, the story of soap was about to change forever. The first rays of sunlight spill across a sprawling city of marble. Towering aqueducts stretch across valleys carrying fresh mountain water toward one of the greatest cities the ancient world had ever seen. Beneath them, broad stone roads buzzed with merchants, soldiers, craftsmen, and families beginning another day. At the heart of the city stands a building unlike anything most civilizations had ever imagined. A public bathhouse. Not a small room, not a private luxury, but an enormous complex where thousands of people gathered every single day. When the Romans rose to power, they inherited ideas about cleanliness from the civilizations before them, but they transformed those ideas into something far greater. Bathing became part of everyday life. Rich or poor, young or old, merchant or soldier, everyone visited the baths. By the 2nd century CE, some of the largest bath complexes covered several acres, with soaring halls, gardens, libraries, exercise courts, shops, and heated pools capable of serving thousands of visitors each day. For many Romans, the baths were more than places to wash. They were where friends met, business deals were made, news spread, children played, philosophers debated, and weary travelers found relief after long journeys. What made all of this possible was one of Rome's greatest engineering achievements: its aqueducts. Built with remarkable precision, these stone channels carried millions of liters of fresh water from distant springs into towns and cities, supplying fountains, homes, and the massive public baths. Without pumps, without electricity, driven only by gravity and careful engineering. Even today, many of these structures continue to amaze historians and engineers. But there is something surprising about Roman bathing. Despite their obsession with cleanliness, most Romans did not rely on bars of soap during their daily baths. Instead, bathers coated their skin with olive oil before entering the bathing routine. After exercising, attendants or the bathers themselves used a curved bronze scraper called a strigil to remove the mixture of oil, sweat, and dirt from the skin. It was an effective method that had been refined over centuries. Soap was known to the Romans. Writers such as Pliny the Elder mentioned soap-like substances, and the physician Galen described medicinal and cleansing uses for soap during the 2nd century CE. But soap was still not the centerpiece of Roman bathing culture. Water, oil, steam, and careful bathing rituals remained far more important. For centuries, the system worked brilliantly. Cities flourished, public health improved compared with many earlier societies, clean water flowed, bathhouses expanded, and Roman engineering became the envy of the ancient world. It seemed as though this civilization had solved the problem of urban cleanliness forever. But history has a habit of changing without warning. In the 5th century CE, the Western Roman Empire began to collapse. Political instability, economic decline, and repeated invasions weakened cities across Western Europe. Aqueducts fell into disrepair. Many bathhouses were abandoned. Without reliable supplies of clean water, one of history's greatest public hygiene systems slowly disappeared. The world was entering a very different age, an age where soap would survive, but the culture of cleanliness would change dramatically, and in some places, it would take centuries to recover. The year is 500 CE. The mighty Western Roman Empire has fallen. Its great bathhouses stand eerily silent. The laughter that once echoed beneath their towering domes has disappeared. Marble floors that welcomed thousands of visitors each day now collect dust. Many aqueducts, once marvels of engineering, have cracked or collapsed, leaving fountains dry and cities struggling to maintain the standards of cleanliness they had enjoyed for centuries. If this is where the story ended, you might believe one of history's most popular myths, that after Rome fell, people simply stopped bathing. But history is rarely that simple. The Middle Ages have long been unfairly remembered as an age of filth, disease, and ignorance. Paintings, novels, and even modern films often portray medieval towns as places where bathing was almost unknown. The truth is far more complicated. In many parts of Europe, public bathhouses continued to operate for centuries after Rome's decline. Though they were often smaller than the grand Roman complexes, they still provided places where ordinary people could wash, relax, and socialize. Soap never disappeared. Its production simply became more local. Without the vast industrial systems of Rome, soap-making returned to workshops, monasteries, and family businesses. Recipes were carefully guarded and passed from one generation to the next, each region adapting them to the materials it could easily obtain. Monasteries became unexpected guardians of cleanliness. Across medieval Europe, monks cultivated medicinal herbs, copied ancient manuscripts, cared for the sick, and maintained regular routines of washing. They preserved practical knowledge that might otherwise have been lost during centuries of political instability. Yet the greatest advances in soap during this period were taking place farther east. Across thriving cities of the Islamic world, skilled craftsmen elevated soap making into a true art. Building upon earlier knowledge from Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome, they refined production techniques using high-quality olive oil, aromatic plant oils, and purified alkaline compounds. The result was a harder, longer-lasting, and more luxurious soap than many earlier varieties. Among the most celebrated was the famous olive oil soap produced in one ancient city of the eastern Mediterranean. Carefully cured for months before use, it became renowned for its gentle cleansing qualities and exceptional durability. Merchants carried these prized bars across deserts and seas, where they quickly earned a reputation as some of the finest soaps in the known world. Their success inspired craftsmen elsewhere. In the kingdoms of southern Europe, soap makers experimented with their own local olive oils and perfected new methods of production. One region became famous for producing a pure white soap made almost entirely from olive oil. Another developed a thriving industry whose fragrant soaps became sought after by merchants throughout the Mediterranean. For the first time, soap was becoming more than a practical necessity. It was becoming a respected craft, a valuable trade, and for those who could afford the finest varieties, a symbol of quality and refinement. But an even greater transformation was approaching. Within a few centuries, science, chemistry, and industry would completely change how soap was made, and who could afford to use it. Across Europe, the air inside soap workshops is thick with the scent of olive oil, wood ash, herbs, and smoke. Master soap makers moved with practiced confidence. Great copper cauldrons bubble over carefully controlled fires as apprentices stir the mixture with long wooden paddles, watching every change in texture and color. Every batch is a test of patience. Too much heat could ruin weeks of work. Too little, and the oils would never properly combine. Soap making had become far more than a household chore. It was now a respected profession. Entire families dedicated their lives to mastering the craft, and prosperous towns became famous for producing soaps whose quality was recognized hundreds of miles away. Merchants knew exactly where to travel when seeking the finest bars. Some regions became renowned for soaps made almost entirely from pure olive oil, prized for their gentle cleansing and luxurious feel. Others perfected recipes that balanced cost, durability, and performance, making soap available to a wider range of customers. Competition encouraged innovation. Soap makers guarded their recipes with remarkable secrecy. Workshops often passed their formulas from one generation to the next, revealing their techniques only to trusted family members or carefully chosen apprentices. A successful recipe could support an entire family for decades. Yet even the finest craftsmen still faced a difficult problem. Soap remained expensive. The ingredients were not always easy to obtain. Producing high-quality alkali required enormous amounts of plant ash, while the best oils demanded successful harvests and reliable trade. The slow curing process meant that finished soap occupied valuable storage space for months before it could be sold. For ordinary families, purchasing fine soap was still considered a luxury. Many households continued to produce simple soaps at home whenever they could, using rendered animal fats and wood ash collected from their own hearths. These homemade soaps lacked the refinement of those produced by skilled artisans, but they served the same essential purpose. Then, something unexpected began to happen. The Renaissance was spreading across Europe. Artists were redefining beauty. Scientists were questioning long-held beliefs. Printers were filling cities with books, and curiosity about the natural world was growing faster than ever before. For the first time in centuries, scholars began examining everyday materials with fresh eyes. Soap was no exception. Instead of relying solely on traditions handed down through generations, craftsmen slowly began to understand why certain ingredients worked better than others. The craft of soap making was beginning its transformation into a science. That change would alter history forever. Because within the next few centuries, chemistry would unlock secrets that generations of artisans had discovered only through trial and error. And once those secrets were understood, soap would never be the same again. The year is 1791. For thousands of years, soap makers had relied on nature. They burned enormous quantities of wood and plants to produce ash. From that ash came the alkaline compounds needed to transform oils and fats into soap. The process worked, but it was painfully inefficient. Entire forests could disappear simply to supply enough ash for growing workshops. Production remained slow, expensive, and unpredictable. One poor harvest or one interrupted trade route could send the price of soap soaring. For centuries, craftsmen accepted these limitations as unavoidable. Then, science intervened. A young French physician and chemist named Nicolas Leblanc introduced a revolutionary method for producing sodium carbonate from common salt. For the first time, manufacturers had a reliable way to obtain one of soap's most important ingredients without depending entirely on vast quantities of plant ash. The breakthrough transformed far more than soap. It reshaped the chemical industry itself. Although political turmoil prevented Leblanc from fully benefiting from his own discovery, his process laid the foundation for a new era of manufacturing. Soap makers immediately recognized its potential. Production became more consistent. Recipes became easier to reproduce. Costs slowly began to fall. As the 19th century unfolded, another powerful force accelerated this transformation: the Industrial Revolution. Across Europe and North America, factories rose above growing cities. Steam engines powered machines that could produce goods faster than any craftsman working by hand. Soap production entered a new age. The great copper kettles remained, but now they stood inside enormous factories rather than family workshops. Rows of workers measured ingredients with increasing precision. Mechanical mixers replaced much of the exhausting manual labor. Large cutting frames sliced perfectly uniform bars within seconds. Drying rooms stretched across entire buildings. What once took weeks in a small workshop could now be accomplished on a scale previous generations could scarcely imagine. For the first time in history, soap was no longer reserved mainly for the wealthy. Prices continued to fall. Ordinary workers could afford to purchase quality soap for their homes. Families that had once relied on crude homemade mixtures could now buy professionally manufactured bars that were cleaner, more consistent, and longer lasting. Cleanliness itself was becoming more accessible. But factories alone did not change the world. People first had to be convinced that soap was worth buying, and that would give rise to something entirely new. Not better soap, better storytelling.
Good morning, Mrs. Abernathy. And to you, Mr. Thompson. Lovely day for it, indeed. Off to the tailor, are we? Just so. And you? To the baker.
The year is 1880. Inside a busy city street, rows of brightly decorated shop windows compete for attention. For the first time in history, soap is no longer sold as a simple block wrapped in plain paper. It has a name, a logo, a promise. Manufacturers quickly realized that making excellent soap was only half the battle. The other half was convincing customers to choose their soap instead of someone else's. Competition exploded. Factories invested not only in better production, but in better packaging. Elegant paper wrappers, beautiful engraved labels, decorative boxes. Soon, newspapers filled with colorful advertisements praising soaps that promised softer skin, cleaner clothes, brighter homes, and healthier families. Illustrators painted smiling mothers, healthy children, spotless kitchens, sparkling white laundry drying beneath the sun. Soap had become more than a cleaning product. It had become a symbol of modern living. As literacy increased, advertisements reached millions of households every week. Companies competed to create memorable slogans, beautiful artwork, eye-catching displays. Some even offered free samples so families could experience the difference for themselves. Then came another revolution, the arrival of radio. For the first time, companies could speak directly into people's homes. Families gathered around wooden radio sets as cheerful announcers enthusiastically described the benefits of different soaps. Memorable jingles echoed across living rooms. Friendly voices built trust with listeners who had never visited the factories themselves. When television followed a few decades later, soap advertising entered an entirely new era. Viewers watched spotless kitchens come to life, children happily washing their hands, families enjoying bright, clean homes. These advertisements became so common that many daytime radio and television dramas were sponsored by soap manufacturers. Before long, people began calling these serialized dramas soap operas. The name remained long after many viewers had forgotten how it began. But while companies competed for customers, another movement was quietly changing the world. Scientists and physicians were learning more about disease than ever before. The discovery that invisible microorganisms could spread illness transformed humanity's understanding of cleanliness. Washing with soap was no longer viewed simply as a way to remove dirt. It became one of the simplest and most effective ways to reduce the spread of harmful germs. Hospitals strengthened hygiene practices. Schools encouraged regular hand washing. Governments launched public health campaigns urging families to wash their hands before eating, after using the toilet, and while caring for the sick. A habit that had once been associated mainly with comfort and appearance was now recognized as a powerful tool for protecting human life. Today, soap exists in forms that ancient civilizations could never have imagined. Solid bars, liquid hand soap, foaming soap, moisturizing soap, medicinal soap, handcrafted artisan soap, eco-friendly soap made from sustainable plant oils. Factories produce millions of bars every single day, yet the basic principle remains almost unchanged. Oil, alkali, and one remarkable chemical reaction first discovered thousands of years ago. From the muddy riverbanks of ancient civilizations to the laboratories of chemists, to the factories of the Industrial Revolution, to bathrooms in nearly every home on Earth, the story of soap is far more than the story of a cleaning product. It is the story of human curiosity, innovation, science, commerce, and our endless pursuit of healthier lives. The next time a bar of soap rests quietly beside your sink, remember, you're holding the result of nearly 5,000 years of human discovery, and that ordinary object has helped change the world.